Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this virtual Overview and Scrutiny Management Board meeting held by virtue of the new regulations introduced by the government. My name is Colin McLaren, Councillor for Chariton Central Ward, and I will be chairing the meeting this evening. The regulations have temporarily removed the legal requirement for local authorities to hold public meetings in person. This will enable councils to make effective and transparent decisions on the delivery of services for residents. The requirement for public meetings is to be made accessible to the public remains, and the link to the virtual meeting is available on the Council's website in the usual live meeting link page. If a connection to a member is lost during this meeting, I will stop the meeting to enable the connection to be restored. If the connection cannot be restored within a reasonable time, the meeting will proceed, but the member who was disconnected will not be able to vote on the matter under discussion, as they would not have heard all the facts. Should any aspect of the external link fail, I may call a short adjournment of up to 5 minutes or so to determine whether the connection can quickly be re-established, either by video technology or telephone in the alternative. If the connection is not restored within that time, the meeting will be adjourned and any further business will not proceed until another time and date. Any public questions properly submitted to the meeting during this period will be read out by myself and answered at the meeting. Before proceeding any further, can I just ask the clerk to confirm the members who are present, please?
Councillor Curley? Not here. Councillor Jakes?
Present.
Councillor Price? No. Councillor Surjan?
Present.
Councillor Taylor?
Present.
Councillor Torr? No. Councillor Williamson?
Present.
And Councillor McLaren?
Present. We also have in attendance officers from Policy, Revenue and Benefits, Northern Care Alliance, NHS Group and Constitutional Services. When the committee comes to take a vote on a report for approval, each member will be individually asked to state whether they are for, against or abstaining. When a report is for noting, I will only ask if a member does not agree. As with ordinary overview and scrutiny management board meetings, once the exclusion of the present public has been moved at the meeting to enable the committee to discuss private reports, the present public will no longer be able to view the meeting. If we can now turn to the agenda, and for the benefit of those watching, the full agenda pack is available on the council's website. So, item 1, Katie, do we have any apologies for absence?
I've not received any, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any declarations of interest from anyone? I'll take silence to mean there are not. There are in fact 2 items of urgent business which we'll take after item, when I find it, item 9 I think it is. So if you just bear with me for 1 second. Are there any public questions, Katie?
We've not received any public questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. The minutes of the previous meetings held on the 20th of October and the 5th of November, are you happy to agree those as a correct record?
Agreed, Chair. Agreed.
Thank you. The minutes of the GMCA Corporate Issues and Reform Overview and Scrutiny meeting held on the 6th of October. Happy to note those?
Noted.
Okay, thank you. Minutes of GMCA Housing Planning and Environment Overview and Scrutiny Committee held on the 8th of October. Happy to note those?
Noted, Chair.
Thank you. Minutes of GMCA Economy, Business Growth and Skills Overview and Scrutiny Committee held on the 20th of October. Are you happy to note those?
Noted, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, that now takes us to item 3, as it were. If we go back to the agenda. First of all, we have Donna McLaughlin, who is presenting a report on behalf of the Northern Care Alliance. Donna.
Thank you, Chair. So you have a paper in front of you that kind of pulls together a number of initiatives that we are pulling together to recognise that we are one of the largest employers within Oldham. We know that the economic impact of COVID is gonna mean that employment is going to be difficult for many groups within our communities, but particularly young people. So this focus looks at what we're trying to do to create pathways for employment into the NHS for young people. So just to highlight the quote at the beginning from our chief exec that came from a session that we did back in October, just to say within health we can either say we are here as a health provider, or we can actually say we have got other powers, particularly around employment and procurement, which can improve the kind of economics of the place that we work in. So rather than go through the details, Chair, I'm probably just happy to take questions. Is that the best way of doing it?
Well, yeah, I'm sure there will be one or two questions. Any questions from members on this report? Question from me then, Donna. Are you able to give us any indication of what the timeline might be in terms of introducing this proposal, and how many other agencies might be involved besides the council?
So there's a number of different projects that have kind of different lifelines. So the two big ones around the BAME community in Coldhurst and young people, they are live now, and they'll be staggered over the next 18 months. So the 20 apprenticeships and the pre-apprenticeships is live. The support for Bridging the Gap, that's an annual event. So we've got some existing schemes. The aim to get to the 1,000, which is a kind of gradual plan, we aim to have in place by 2025, and that's across the NCA. So that's the 4 boroughs that we work with. Okay.
Are you aware of any other proposals of this nature with other agencies, or is it just the council and NCA working together? But are there any other strategies that we might be able to take forward, given the huge increase in employment that we're experiencing at the present time, and the need for training, retraining, etc.?
So we are
be apparent.
Yeah, we're always looking for partnerships. So it's indicated in the paper, we do a lot of work with Oldham College. So what we're trying to do with Oldham College is make sure that the health and social care courses within the college directly link to jobs. So we've done some work with them. We've got a relationship with Positive Steps, who are the youth service, provide services to young people in Oldham. So we are always looking for relationships and partnerships in this space. We kind of recognise that in the health service, we don't really get paid for this kind of stuff. We're paid to treat people. So we need that partnership because we haven't necessarily got all of those skills. So a lot of it is opportunistic, where there is funny monies available. A lot of it is based on relationships. And so we just keep on looking in this area.
Okay, so when you talk about funny money, Donna, how funny is the money, and where does it come from?
It's not funny as in it's usually opportunistic grants. So some of it comes from, so we've got 2 at the moment, one from Greater Manchester Combined Authority, and we also have been awarded some money through yourselves in terms of being an opportunity area. So anything that is about, I suppose what the point I want to bring is, we're often seen as a health and social care provider. We're not seen as a big employer. So I often say, if we're a big employer, so across the 4 localities, with 20,000 staff, if an organisation was to land and say to the 4 councils of Oldham, Salford, Bury and Rochdale, we're going to bring you 20,000 jobs, we would, that it's trying to say that's the economic and kind of job creation that we've got. We probably have about 750 level entry jobs, so probably about 100 orders within Oldham every year. So that's the pipeline that we've got to generate, and we've got to see those local jobs for local people in each of the localities we work at. So
is there a sufficiently large budget available to accommodate that kind of number as they gradually become available?
So we know we've got the jobs. What we don't necessarily have is the skills around to make sure that we're reaching out to the hard to reach groups, because what happens under, you all know this, what happens under times of economic hardship, those who find it difficult to get work, the queue becomes even bigger. So we know that we can fill jobs with people who have maybe just been made out of work, and therefore young people who haven't got the experience, or those who may have additional barriers, get pushed even further away. So
Yeah.
we're trying to make sure that we've got an outreach into those areas.
Right. Is there any sort of opportunity for a jobs fair, if you like, or
Yeah,
some kind that we can advertise and promote?
Yeah, so we have we are quite restricted at the moment because of COVID. So
Yeah.
so we are still doing stuff virtually. So we are doing connections into colleges and schools virtually where we can. We have done big open days previously that have been really successful. We've got agreement in principle to actually go into Oldham College and to do a recruitment fair there. So we go to the young people rather than expecting them to come to us. So we're just trying to see where things land with the virus in terms of what we can do over social distancing, etc. But definitely that's the way forward.
Thank you very much. Liz?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions. Is the take-up from Oldham schools quite high at the moment? And secondly, with the T-levels, obviously the students have a 90-day placement. Are there enough placements available for them? And with T-levels, the entry requirements are quite high. You have to have maths and English to get on the T-levels course. So is there an entry level to get on, for students who haven't got that kind of academic grade?
So I'm not an expert on education. So in terms of the T-levels, we are working closely with Oldham College to make sure that the placement requirements are of use to us as an employer, so that when the learners have got those days placements, they'll actually come to do some meaningful work for us, because then that increases your capacity. So if you've just got a learner who's standing next to you, it feels like a burden. If you've got a learner who can answer a phone and do some basic observations within a clinical environment, then actually you embrace that. So that's what we're trying to do. We haven't got unlimited capacity, but we're trying to make available whatever capacity we've got. It's really hard to put a cap on that. So we're working with each department to try and work that through as the T levels develop. So the main ones we're working with Oldham College are, yes, health and social care in terms of hands-on care, but also business administration and also estates and facilities. We've got a real big need for estates and facilities, so for plumbers, electricians, that kind of thing, and people don't tend to think about that with us. They tend to think doctors and nurses. And the other one we've done a lot of work on is healthcare scientists. So Oldham Hospital has got the second biggest lab in Greater Manchester. So in terms of a real opportunity for Oldham is around healthcare scientist roles. And so the second question around maths and English, that's why I was really keen to highlight the work that we're doing around the pre-apprenticeship, which is exactly what you say, to kind of almost, we know we have got some young people and other members of the community who don't have maths and English, but that doesn't mean they haven't got skills that we don't need. But it's how do we have them weigh in, which is why we're doing work through the pre-apprenticeship programme, which is specifically going after those kids who might not have maths and English, to then work with the college to get them those maths and English so that they can work with us, or also to look at what else we can do to support, because we do offer maths and English as an employer to support people who haven't got it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ruji?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the information that you provided so far. I think you touched upon something that I was going to mention. I was aware of the fact that obviously there's employment opportunities available, and obviously you're targeting specifically Calder, given the fact that it's in the catchment area of the hospital. And my concern is obviously, you've started this project, it's fantastic and everything, but given the fact that we're in a pandemic, how many of those people that you're targeting will actually be made aware of those job roles still being available? So, you mentioned, for example, the electrician, admin staff, IT services, etc. And obviously, especially the young people as well, they might not be aware. Like you said, if they think of a hospital, they might just think nurses, doctors, surgeries, gynecologists, although the high level, 10, 20 years of education requirement, whereas the sort of lower skilled jobs they might not think of. So what kind of push are you going to, have you got a plan in place, and are you reaching out to, for example, the community sector, local faith groups, mosques, churches, temples, them sort of things. I'm sure you thought about it, but I'd just like to
I think if we just for a moment, can we just do fantasy world and pretend that COVID doesn't exist, and then we'll come back and talk about what we're doing now that COVID is here. COVID has huge advantages from the NHS because, you know, most people now know more about the NHS than they've ever known, so we kind of almost have to harness that crest of a wave around the support that we know we have from the population. But for me, it is about going into schools and going in at primary school level, because we know, particularly, you know, excuse me, gentlemen, I just talk about women for a minute. We know, particularly for girls, they make gender decisions really early. So we have the NHS Career Ambassador is a national programme where we train staff and we give them time off to go into those areas. Oldham historically has underused that, so we've got a massive campaign across our sites at the moment. We're really keen also to make sure that we represent the diversity of our population. So if you are going into a primary school, that we are representing the children, so the person who stands in front of you looks like you, and that we have a mixture of young people and more experienced staff to talk that through. There are 350 careers in the NHS. Doctors and nurses is one. Now, they are not dismissing, they're a big number, but a third of our staff don't need degrees and can come through FE, whereas everyone thinks immediately of doctors and nurses, casualty, what they see on the telly. So we are really pushing the non-nurse, the non-clinical roles at the moment, because we know those are the staff that have perhaps got more time at the minute to start. So I'm doing a big campaign around getting, you know, our accountants, the estates guys, all those people ready, and we've got little videos ready. So through the council, I am asking for support to get into schools, because we traditionally go into schools where our staff are parents of, not necessarily into the schools where they may not have those role models. So it's an area that we definitely have got aspirations to do work on. And so we're linking in through the opportunity area to make sure that we're getting into the schools that may not have those role models standing at the school gate.
Brilliant. I mean, I'm happy in a personal capacity to arrange that and sit with you. And
perfect. I mean, we went into through Majid, who chairs the CCG, we've sent some staff went into the mosques. It's just, you know, if you say to staff, particularly at the minute, because, you know, staff are pretty tired and knackered, but if you say to them, go and talk to a room full of kids, it's just, you know, it lights up your day. You know, it gives you a bit of hope. So you know, we're doing. It doesn't work as well virtually, I will say. So yeah, please, just, you've got my email. Just drop me an email if there's you know, a group that you want us to go into. We can get staff.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anything you could do in that respect, Liz? Is there something that you could you know, take on in some respects in Manchester?
I can certainly talk to people about it. Working in a college, it's I'm actually didn't realise that. I mean, I work in an FE college, and if a third of the staff are coming from FE, that's obviously a great interest to me as well. So I would speak to people.
But maybe we could do some, so we're doing some stuff nationally to try and influence that, because one of the things I did when I first started looking at this was I said to my trust board, can you name the vice chancellor of your universities? And they all could. And I said, could you name the number of FE colleges that were in your patch? And they couldn't. So I think we, the NHS, have been really sniffy and only talk to universities without recognising actually there is a whole plethora of talent through FE that we don't connect in with. So that I'm part of some national work with the NHS Confederation around the colleges of the future, and how do we actually make that connection between FE and the NHS stronger. So Oldham is actually named in a national report that got published about November last year on the case study of some of the stuff that we're doing. So we are really pushing the boundaries of this.
Okay, thank you very much. Diane?
Thank you, Chair. What I wanted to say was, last year I spent quite a bit of time in hospitals, and I was speaking to a variety of people, as you do when you go in, pharmacists, you know, porters and everything. And what I noticed, which is whichever hospital I seem to go into, I always seem to meet the person that had been there for so many years, but they'd started as a really young age, and that really inspired me, because I just thought they were so proud to work for that hospital, but even prouder to be working for the NHS now. So I think that if we can get into schools and talking to schools, I mean, if you want to talk to the kids in our primary schools in Shore and Crompton, we'll be happy to help you with that. But and the secondary schools. But you're quite right. It starts from the primary school age, and that's where it's key to go in and show them that people of different, who look different to them as well as look the same as them, actually can do the same work, can be a porter, can be a nurse, can be a pharmacist, you know, can be a cook, whatever. But it just gives them a bit of inspiration from a very early age. So I really do admire what you've done. So thank you for bringing this to us.
No, and just to kind of because it was actually a story from Royton. So we did an open day 2 years ago where we brought 150 kids onto the site, and there was a teacher came with 3 girls who sat at the back and fiddled initially, and just weren't really paying attention, and the teacher kept nudging them, and then they got chatting to one of our healthcare scientists who figured out that she went to the same primary school as they did. And she told them how much she earned. And she said to them, I messed about and I only left with minimum qualifications, and I had to do it the hard way. I had to go back to evening class and I had to work up the hard, you know, but I had the support because I had a supportive team I worked with. I got an email 3 months later from the teacher who said those 3 girls had turned up every day since they'd been on that open day, and they were at the verge of kind of not quite going off the rails, but, you know, they could have turned left and gone into, you know, not been as and that actually that one intervention kept their interest to kind of look at education in a different route, because they could see how it led to a job and how it led to a really nice house and a nice car and a salary. So it sometimes it is just that one intervention can make a difference.
Thank you. Jamie?
Oh, helps if you unmute yourself. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Donna. Obviously, I say obviously you don't know. I'm well aware of the great work and the great opportunities that were in Northern Care Alliance, because it's something of our family business. My wife, my daughter, my son-in-law all work for the trust, and they speak really highly, and they're very, very proud to do it. I just wondered, it's British Science Week, early March, 5th to the 14th. I'll drop you a line. Perhaps we could do something. It's likely it could be a virtual thing like this, but perhaps I'm in a secondary school, a high school in Rochdale, not very far from the infirmary. Perhaps we could do something online with, you know, our year 9, 10, 11s, regards opportunities, because they're thinking now about going into FE colleges and stuff. Maybe we could do something about opportunities within sciences within the trust. If I drop you a line, would that be okay?
Yeah, perfect. Drop me a line. We've got some really good little exercises where we show them bugs and we show them this is what, you know, we can almost show them this is what the coronavirus looks like. You know, so we can kind of do some quite interactive. So yeah, I've got Julia Miller who works for the lab, and she's an educationist as well as being a scientist, so she's got loads of stuff we can put in with schools.
Fantastic. That sounds brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anything from anyone else? Where do you think you might be by July, Donna? What, you know, are we, you know, in terms of a, you know, progress report and so on? The big risk to all of this is because we're in a pandemic, then there are national decisions are made about who can and can't go on hospital sites is made nationally. At the moment, they've said we can restart work experience from 1st of February. So we're starting to bring back people onto site, but into non-COVID areas. That really reduces what we can do, because that is our rate limiting factor at the moment is we can't expose people. And at the moment, we can't say hospitals are, even if you've got a green, you know, a designated non-COVID, the level of disease is so high that that's our challenge at the moment. So I'm hesitant about once we can start bringing kids back on site, because that does make a difference. And you know this from teaching, to touch and feel and experience something. Yeah. Is just that's what we need to be able to do, particularly for young people. Well, perhaps we could get in touch with you around about May, the start of the next municipal year, so to speak, just to see where, what the situation is, with a view to perhaps coming back to to present some kind of a report in July, maybe subject to the caveats that you've just outlined.
Yeah, that would be great.
I think we might have another question. Or Amanda.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Donna.
Hello.
Thanks for that. I'm Amanda. I'm an officer in corporate policy team at the council. We've seen unemployment increase in the borough quite substantially. A lot of jobs have been lost, and I wondered if there were any opportunities for people who older learners, who may be looking to or needing to actually to reskill, to retrain, to look elsewhere for jobs if theirs have gone and may not be returning in some cases. Yes, I just wondered if there was like an older apprenticeship or reskilling scheme.
Yeah, so I was specifically asked to focus on young people for this report. We, again, through our relationship with Oldham College, because Oldham College don't just have young people, they also have older adult learners. There is also a resource that we tap into, we've started to tap into across the boroughs, which is around the ESOL learners. So we know that within ESOL learners, there every time I've done a couple of events with ESOL learners, I found a doctor, I found a radiographer. So actually you can find people who were skilled in previous through previous countries that we can then work with to get back into those professions, and we have got means of doing that. So I think we need to link in better with our FE colleagues to say actually what are the retraining opportunities and how do we then make them job specific. So for example, I've got a scheme that I'm about to start with pilots. So a lot of pilots have been made redundant and potentially going to be redundant for a short period, because hopefully we will all go on holiday at some point. But they are really skilled at logistics. Well, we've got this small matter of vaccinating everybody, so we're actually using some form of pilots to help with that. We've gone to the air industry. So at Salford Royal, we took on 20 cabin crew, because cabin crew can do basic first aid and also really good at logistics. They're actually being marshals at our through the vaccination centres. So we try and be opportunistic with this, but this is where I think the connections into the FE would really help, because it is, we now know that people are not just having one career, they might have 2 or 3 careers, and it might be as your family grow up, you've got developed different skills that you could then bring into the health service later on. There was a fact that I learned the other day that if every child who'd ever watched Casualty or put a nurse's uniform on chose to be a nurse, we still haven't got enough. We actually need people to come into nursing later as well as straight from school, because there aren't enough school kids who are interested.
Thanks, Donna.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, well, thank you very much for the report, and I will look forward to talking to you in around about May, just to see how things are progressing, and then with a view to perhaps trying to present an update subject to conditions, etc. Is this a quick question, Liz?
Yeah, it is, because I'm also a governor at the LTE group. I just wondered if you could email me your contact details.
Yeah, so
could you send them to Katie, Donna?
Katie's got them, so Katie will circulate them around. You have
to write 4 or 5 different emails.
Yeah, and honestly, please link. So anybody, as long Salford, Rochdale, Bury, Oldham, anywhere around there, I'll go anywhere, talk to anybody.
Okay. Thank you very much, Donna. Much appreciated. We'll talk to you again. Thank you very much. Okay, that takes us on to the second item of urgent business from Caroline: corporate complaints policy and unreasonable behaviour policy. These were presented to me by Caroline last Thursday, and I did suggest that perhaps it would be better if we, rather than me approve them, that we should present them to the committee for their consideration and hopefully approval. But I think we looked at something along these lines last July, you might recall. So this is the follow-on from the discussion that took place last summer. Caroline.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Members will recall, as Councillor McLaren's just said, that a proposed policy for the management of unreasonable customer behaviour and also an updated corporate complaints policy was submitted to previous Overview and Scrutiny Board for debate and consideration. In pulling together these policies, the Council wants to engage with customers in a way that's open, fair and proportionate. And the aim of in particular, the unreasonable behaviour policy is to help in the limited occasions in which it occurs, manage both customer and complainant expectations and behaviour as far as possible when dealing with the council when it becomes unreasonable. It also gives a roadmap for officers and for members where it occurs in providing that support and structure for managing unreasonable behaviour in an appropriate and proportionate way. The updated corporate complaints policy also sets out in detail the process that the council will use in managing corporate complaints so that our residents know exactly what the stages are and whether or not a complaint can be considered under the corporate complaints policy or not. Some comments that have been made by members to date have been noted and further advice taken as requested following the July Overview and Scrutiny Board meeting and fed back to the Chair about the limitations of the policy in relation to conduct of in public meetings of the Council, which was a query that came up in July of last year. So, as requested, both policies are now circulated to the board for approval, really, prior to being submitted for formal approval by a cabinet member under the delegated scheme of approval. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Karen. Diane?
Thank you, Chair. I've read through the document and I just wonder why we keep calling, you just said residents, but in the document it keeps saying customer.
Yeah.
Can you just sort of explain why we've said customer?
Yes. Yeah, I think at the beginning of the document we set out the sort of definition. So customer brings into account residents, businesses, anybody that's transacting with the council, including third parties. So we've said right at the outset we will use a generic term all the way through the document, and I think we define what we mean. So we is the council, but it's also the wider team Oldham. So those definitions are right at the outset of the policy.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments from anyone? Elaine.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm flitting back and forth here between minutes and my screen, so just bear with me. I was just having a look through the section under unreasonable communication, and I think the one thing that I wanted to flag up, certainly in my experience, and I don't know if it's the same for other members that are on this meeting, but what we're finding more and more is that a lot of people now seem to have phones that automatically record conversations that they have, and they send us copies of those recordings via email. And I'm not sure it's a direct question in relation to this, but I guess it's something just to be mindful of, because I think in the past where we was dealing with people contacting us and relaying information, what we're now getting is people saying you can listen to the conversations directly. And I'm never really sure where we stand with that as a member, because obviously in pretty much all of these cases, they haven't had the permission to record the person that they're speaking to. And I do think for us, in terms of our due diligence, I think it would be helpful for us to get some guidance on that about, you know, should we be listening to these recordings? Should we have some kind of statement that we issue to people, you know, telling them that it's inappropriate for us to do so. So while I appreciate it's not necessarily directly related to the report that we're discussing today, I do think it's an offshoot from that, because quite often I would say that the people who have had these emails from with these recordings would quite often be the people who are quite belligerent in their approach to issues, and you know, once you get an answer that is not an answer they'd hoped for, they will find a different way of asking the same question, and it can, you know, it can go on for some time. So I'm sorry, Caroline, I don't want to put you in a difficult position because I know it's not it's not directly related, but I just do think it's something we need to be mindful of.
Yeah, it's a really good point that you raise, and while it's not part of this policy, as you say, it has been an area that we have discussed and within the council, and felt that there is a need for a policy document on it, because obviously you've mentioned a particular circumstance where as members you're sent recorded conversations. There's a wider issue about whether recorded conversations can be used in appeal matters, whether they in terms of complaints, whether it can go to the ombudsman for appeal panels and that sort of thing, when discussions are had with social workers, and whether that can be used as part of like the wider consideration about the way forward. So there is probably a gap there that you rightly point of policies that we will be happy to take away. We've had early discussions on it. And I think probably many local authorities are in a similar position to us in terms of not having an explicit policy document on it. But I will certainly take that back and as part of those considerations. But you're quite right to point that out. It's definitely been a subject of conversations around complaints and recorded information without consent at that point. So we need a clear policy statement on it, I think.
Thank you, Caroline. And just to supplement that very, very briefly, Chair, if I may,
Sure.
one of the examples of that, just for you to take away, was somebody who had a conversation. Well, they'd had an issue with a social worker. It had been ongoing for quite some time, and it ended up in a going through a formal process, I guess, whereby you know, they felt that the resident or client's behaviour was inappropriate. What the resident did was to contact me and to ask me for my opinion, to say, I don't think I was being inappropriate. Do you think I was being inappropriate? And because you had recordings, and it put me in a very kind of tricky situation, really. I mean, I didn't listen to them, and I obviously went back and said it would be inappropriate because I wasn't involved in that process. But she was pushing me quite heavily to try and get me to give an opinion, which clearly she wanted to use herself then in an appeal environment, etc. So I do think as members we can sometimes very much get caught in the crossfire in all of this, and it is something that I think we just need to be mindful about. But yeah, I mean, by all means, if you can take it away, that would be really helpful. Thanks, Caroline.
Yeah, happy to do that.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments from members? Right, are we therefore happy to endorse these two policies so Caroline can take them to Cabinet briefing for final approval? Are they then coming to Council, Caroline? Is that the general idea?
I'm not sure about that, Councillor McLaren. What I do know that is it will be agreed through delegated cabinet member approval. So I don't know if then beyond that it needs to go to council or not, but I'll take advice from colleagues in constitutional services about that.
Okay, lovely. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Happy to endorse the policies.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay, which enables us then to move on to the next item, and that is original item 8, general exception and special urgency decisions. I think there are 2. Are you happy to note those?
No.
Okay.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Which then takes us to item 9, which is, I think, when I find it, this is to do with COVID-19 recovery strategy, and I think we have Jonathan here to introduce the report for us. Jonathan.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair. It's good to see you all after probably coming on 9 months now. Thank you for the opportunity to come and speak with you about our plans to develop Oldham's COVID recovery plan. Before I dive into the development of the recovery plan itself, I just wanted to quickly provide a little bit of context to how we've got to where we've got to at the moment. So as you all are aware, our current corporate plan expired in December 2020. We had started working on a new refreshed corporate plan in early 2020, which would have been signed off in May. However, the pandemic hit and it quickly became apparent that the world was going to change and change significantly, and that the priorities that we'd set in the newly refreshed corporate plan, though still relevant, didn't really reflect the incredibly challenging time that we found ourselves in, and of course still find ourselves in. So in May 2020, a decision was taken to suspend the sign-off of the refreshed corporate plan until the full implications of the pandemic could be assessed. At the time, if I'm honest, I don't think many people imagined we would still be facing the challenges posed by the pandemic nearly 12 months on. And I think it's become really clear now that the impacts of COVID are going to be with us for many years. Long after a vaccine has been rolled out, people will be feeling the economic, psychological and health implications of one of the most challenging times I think we can all agree in living memory. So to support Oldham's recovery from the pandemic, we are going to be developing a 12-month recovery plan that will take us from May this year until May 2022. The purpose of this really is to coordinate all the activity that needs to happen to help Oldham and our residents find their feet after such a challenging year. So hopefully, as we start to see society open up as the vaccine continues to be rolled out, it's those key actions that we need to be taking. The recovery plan will act as an interim corporate plan, so it will bridge that gap between where we are now to when we can properly refresh the corporate plan alongside the Oldham plan in spring next year. So the report I've brought to ONS this evening really aims to update you on the process for developing that recovery plan. As you'll see, we're at a really early stage in the consultation process, though we are working really quickly to speak to officers, councillors, partners and of course our residents through a soon to be launched COVID recovery survey. And this consultation really is to aim to identify the key priorities for the next 12 months, which we will then feed into the plan and the accompanying action plan. So we've started to do some really early work looking at the data and intelligence about where we think the gaps are and where we need to be focusing our fire. And those are the themes that I've outlined in the report. So just very quickly, driving equality. So we know that the COVID pandemic has exacerbated many existing inequalities in Oldham. You know, there are lots more people seeking crisis support, more people at risk of poverty, more people facing the impacts of health inequalities, especially people who've had delayed healthcare. So we're working with services to look really at how we start to bridge those gaps using lived experience through the Equality Advisory Group, through the existing poverty proofing audits that have been happening in schools, and through the Planned Poverty Truth Commission to look at the activity that we need to put in place to continue supporting our most vulnerable residents. Secondly, that point about investing in quality housing. So ensuring Oldham's housing stock is good quality and affordable. Again, there's lots of evidence nationally that poor housing has really exacerbated the impact of the pandemic on certain communities. So that's something we need to tackle fundamentally for Oldham's long-term recovery. The third theme that we've identified is that point about a green recovery, so championing a green recovery. I think it's really clear that the pandemic has shown the importance of good quality, accessible green space. You know, you only need to look at Dovestones now at the weekends and people trying to access that green space. And, you know, the requirement for it for both health and leisure purposes. So I think we need to, you know, be tackling these issues, linking into things like air quality, which also links to our broader ambition around reducing our carbon footprint, of course. Fourthly, the fourth theme is around providing accessible and resident-focused services. So as we all know, like tonight, the way our communities access services have changed, with lots more services being digital. We need to build on that, but at the same time, we need to ensure that we have an equitable offer for our residents and that we're providing the right level of support so people can access services in these new ways. Theme 5 is around creating and protecting jobs and supporting businesses. I won't say much about that. I think it speaks for itself. And theme 6, prioritising education and skills. So again, at a national level, there's talk of a lost generation when it comes to some young people who've missed out on nearly a year of face-to-face schooling. So how we start to work with schools and colleges and children and young people to ensure they catch up and achieve their aspirations will be really, really key. And of course, linked to that is Amanda's earlier point about people who potentially have lost jobs and about the retraining offer. So we've identified these 6 very high level themes at the moment, and each of these focus areas will form a key plank of the COVID-19 recovery plan, with individual actions and performance measures or metrics being attached to each priority area. At this stage, I'd really welcome any feedback from ONS on the draft themes. We wanted to give you the opportunity to input as early as possible in this piece of work. So that's why we brought it to you at such an early stage. We will be doing lots of consultation over the coming 4 to 5 weeks, and we'll be bringing an actual draft version of the plan back to ONS in March for further input and consultation. But as I said, really welcome any early feedback this evening. Happy to have conversations outside of this meeting if helpful, if you need some time to reflect on what we've discussed. But yeah, just thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions or very, very early feedback.
Okay, thank you very much, Jonathan. Any questions or comments from members? Question from me then. Go on, I'll take Elaine first. And yeah, Elaine.
Yeah, sorry, thanks, Chair. Sorry, just 1 second. Let me go back to the minute. Sorry, the agenda pack.
Yeah.
Just a couple of questions from me, please. The first one is in relation to the priorities. So obviously we've got prioritising education and skills. I just wondered in relation to school readiness, how it might have impacted on that and what the plan is for our kind of youngest people who will be starting school. And the other point that I just wanted to ask was around libraries, essentially. Obviously, we've got limitations at the moment because we've only got a number of libraries open across the borough. And obviously, for some of our people who access libraries to use, to get assistance with kind of computer usage and to get online, etc., quite often they're the people from the most disadvantaged households, the people who are least likely to travel to other parts of the borough, etc. Now, I anticipate fully, Jonathan, that this isn't going to be ongoing. I understand that that's a very here and now situation, but I just wondered what provision we're making in the absence of some of those library facilities being on offer at the moment.
Yeah, both really, really good questions, and if I'm honest, I'm probably not best placed to answer them at the moment. I'd want to go back and speak to officers who manage those services. What I will say is when it comes to school readiness, I think what we do recognise is a lot of young people won't have, especially very young kids, won't have had the opportunity to, for example, attend nursery this year, and that will definitely be impacting on school readiness. We have flagged that. So when we sit down with those services and we're looking at those priorities, we have a range of prompts for those service areas, so we can definitely feed both those points in. I think the point about libraries is again a really interesting one. I know there's lots of work going on at the moment around digital inclusion and how we try and provide support to those communities who did rely, for example, on computers in libraries. And I know colleagues have done work around trying to get laptops out to some disadvantaged households. But again, I think there's probably still work to do and work that needs to be included in the strategy. So thank you for flagging both of those. I think they're really important, and I'm happy to go away and have conversations with colleagues and bring a more complete answer back if that's helpful.
I mean, Jonathan, it's fine if it's something that you're looking into. It's just because it wasn't covered on the slides. I just wanted to kind of bring it to your attention, but thank you.
Thank you.
Questions or comments from anyone else? Jamie.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for bringing this to us, Jonathan, and giving us the opportunity. You mentioned about green spaces. and in particular Dovestones. And yeah, I think almost every weekend for the last umpteen weekends, my phone has been smoking with people going on about Dovestones. I think what that has done, and you're quite right to mention it, is the importance of green spaces. I mean, now as part of the COVID recovery, and I think as people appreciate green spaces as part of healthy living, as part of improving mental health and stuff like that. So I think what I would like to see in there is perhaps an expansion of that. People do tend to just head for Dovestones, and it creates all sorts of headaches for myself and Graham Sheldon up here. And it's one of the things that people think of, but we are actually quite blessed with quite a fair few open spaces around the borough and on the edge of the borough. And perhaps people aren't aware of them. And I understand, with lockdown, you're stuck inside. If you're stuck inside with, quite a number of children and stuff like that, you're desperate to access them. And I think we need to work with perhaps outside agencies, the RSPB, United Utilities, who manage these places and stuff like that, and just expand it and let people know that some of this stuff is actually on their doorstep. If they have trouble with transport, they don't have access to transport, maybe these things aren't too far away for them, but they just don't know. And I think that's something that we could certainly expand and show what's on offer.
I think that's a really good and valid point. And just as an aside, just as an observation, I've walked the Oldham Way quite a few times now, and it's incredible how much green space is right around Oldham, even very close to the town centre. So absolutely, I think making sure that we are promoting that is going to be key.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything from anyone else? Okay, from me then, Jonathan, one of the things that I wonder about is whether this is going to have to prompt a different way of working. Let me try and give you an example. Further on the agenda, we've got the Task and Finish Poverty report, and one of the things that emerged from that was that there was lots of good work going on in terms of addressing poverty, but not everybody necessarily knew what everybody else was doing, which was slightly disconcerting in some respects. So I do wonder whether, given the current situation that the council finds itself in terms of its budget and staffing resources, etc., whether this might prompt a reconsideration of teams and structure of teams and cross-reference between teams, etc. Because clearly we are faced with a situation where we are going to have to try and do much more with possibly much less, you might say. So it might mean that we have to be, I know finding efficiencies is becoming more and more difficult, but whether this prompts a way of rethinking the way in which we work in order to provide a sharper focus, if you like, so that we're doing more in these areas and less in some other areas, if you like. Doesn't mean that we stop doing them necessarily, but we may have to consider shifting the emphasis in terms of how we work. And also, I think the other thing that we have to think about is that we can't do it on our own. That we're going to have to look very carefully at not only public bodies but the private sector as potential partners, etc., in order to consider how we might be able to take some of these programs forward. And maybe we look at one or two pilots to begin with, say, to see how well they work together, what kind of social value we might be able to identify in order to enable us to take some of these, deliver some of these in some of these areas, as it were, and how quickly we might be able to progress them, because clearly the need is now, but the answer might not necessarily be available now. The answer may have to emerge. So it may be that we have a short-term plan, a medium-term plan, and potentially a a longer term plan, depending on what resources, money and all the rest of it becomes available. So I know there's a whole host of questions in there, but clearly what I'm trying to perhaps elaborate is a kind of a strategy.
I think you've hit on so many really valid points there, Colin. It's hard to tease out where to focus my response. But what I will say is that I think COVID has been a real it's galvanized the public sector in a way that I've since working in the public sector for 10 years in a way I've definitely never experienced before. I've been really proud to work shoulder to shoulder with the VCFSE sector, with our partners right across Team Oldham, and with our communities to tackle the huge challenges that we've faced over the last 9 months and that we continue to face. And one of the things I'm very conscious of is making sure that we don't lose all that learning and all that experience that we've gained, because we have gained so much. Yeah. And I think you're right, those new ways of working now have to be embedded. We can't retreat and go back to how we all used to work and retreat back into delivering things in isolation. It's all got to continue to be part of that much wider partnership. So I think how we stitch in those new ways of working into this almost as a cross-cutting theme in this recovery plan is going to be absolutely fundamental. I just need to take some time to reflect on how we best do that.
If there's nothing from anybody else, just to sort of continue the conversation, Jonathan, is there any scope? I mean, I know you're suggesting that you come back in March, but in the meantime, is there any scope for officer member input in each of those themes, that there is a small work group, etc., to, if you like, bounce a few ideas around off each other, and that you would then get a degree of member input, if you like, at this kind of stage. We appear to be in the embryo stage, the incubator stage, if you like, ideas department. And perhaps there might be some scope for that kind of discussion. Of course, not everything that comes out of that kind of dialogue is necessarily achievable, deliverable, but out of that might come a few nuggets, some crystallizing of thinking that might enable us to develop a sort of coherent approach, because all of these are all interrelated in one way or another. They're not themes that you can look at in isolation, but clearly they are interrelated, and but some thinking in all of those different areas that might then coalesce into a kind of a strategy, maybe worth some consideration.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I've said, we want input from all members, and we have planned in some sessions over the next month. First of all, with sort of senior officers, followed by portfolio holders, followed by ONS again. But I think any opportunities for further feeding in would always be welcome.
Well, we could run it as an ONS kind of informal project between now and March, and arrange one meeting and invite members on each theme, possibly. I know resources are always tight, of course, and we are in a very difficult situation, officer-wise, staff-wise, etc. No doubt about that. But we have to find a way of moving forward somehow, and we have to find a way of recovering, if you like, from this, not just in COVID terms, but in budgetary terms, etc. We need to find money, and the money appears to be either with partners or the grant system, or a combination of both, match funding and so on. There is a lot of thinking that's going to have to be done around these kind of areas in order to enable us to try and find an acceptable way forward.
Would you mind if I take that away, Colin, and speak to my direct line manager, if that's okay, and maybe we can pick up the conversation offline about how best to build that in?
Yeah, no, happy to talk to you again, Jonathan, without any shadow of a doubt. Is there anything from anybody else at this point in time? So what we're saying really is that there'll be a further update in March, depending on how the various conversations continue over the next 6 or 7 weeks or so. I think the 9th of March is our next meeting, as it were, and the last of this municipal year. But what it might be possible to do at that stage, Jonathan, is to agree a sort of strategy over the coming months from that point that takes us to June, July, and so forth. So are we happy to note the report for the time being, and Jonathan comes back to us, but in the meantime he and I will have a conversation at some point and see what we might be able to do in the intervening period.
Yeah, no,
okay with that?
Yeah.
All right, okay.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Much appreciated. Thanks a lot. Which takes us on to the next one, the homeless strategy update. We had expected Bryn Cook. This report was withdrawn initially from the agenda, but I did suggest that rather than just simply withdraw it, that they come back with a bullet point report that would enable us to prompt a conversation. You might remember that we did something similar with Lorraine Kenny in a previous meeting, and so unfortunately that hasn't happened. All we've got is this page. So what I'm going to suggest, that if you have any questions, if you aren't able to think of them right now, perhaps if you'd like to send the questions to Katie, and if we say by the end of this week, so there's a time limit on it, any questions to Katie on homelessness, so that she can then forward them to Bryn with a view to, if you like, perhaps attaching the answers as an appendix to the minutes or something, but we can sort that out afterwards. Is that acceptable at this point in time? There will be a proper report at some point, but whether it'll be in March remains to be seen. I suspect not. It might be later in the year, but we'll talk about the March meeting when we get to the work programme, if that's okay. Any comments on what I've just outlined?
No, happy with that, Chair.
Happy to accept that. Are we all okay with that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Now that takes us then to the report on poverty. A little bit of background first of all. This is the Task and Finish group, and this is the outcome of the work that the ONS board agreed to set up last March, continued in June, and we've been working on it over the last 6 months or so. So what you're about to see is the outcome of our various deliberations, and as you've seen from the front of the report, the authors are in fact the members of the Task and Finish group, but we've had a lot of help from and advice from Amanda Richardson, who is with us this evening. But Kath Ball, who's the Deputy Cabinet Member responsible for poverty, has also put together some slides, etc., which I'm going to suggest that she shares with us now, and then we can come back to the report if that's okay. Kath, are you with us?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm here.
Right.
If Katie can put the slides on, please.
Right. There we go.
Can I just say, can I pass on Councillor Shah's apologies, but her sister's really quite poorly at the moment, so that's where she is.
Okay, not to worry.
Right. Thanks very much. We are where we are with poverty. Poverty has been increasing in Oldham for quite some time, but we've seen nothing since the onset of COVID. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So this is what we're facing. Most of the statistics that we do have are already out of date because they come from 2018 to 2019. In October 20, there were 13,680 claimants in Oldham of universal credit, and that had gone up by 5,355 just in 7 months. Many new jobs had come on stream, but many have been poor, 0-hour contracts, so they were the first to go. And on average, it costs a family £1,076 more than other families to be poor. And that's because of increase in shopping costs and in insurance costs, etc. Next slide, please. These are just some statistics about families and what percentage number of families are in poverty. So families with children, 22 to 30 out of 100 families are in poverty. And again, this is 2018, 2019. If a family's got a disabled person, that's 26 in 100 families. Black families, it's 42 in 100. Pakistani families, 46 in 100. And Bangladeshi families, 53 in 100. And as I'm saying, those are all statistics. Those will now be worse. So you can see what a mammoth task we've got ahead of us. Next slide, please. And then destitution. The definition of destitution is a poverty so extreme that one lacks the means to provide for oneself. And the recent statistics I've got on this from the Joseph Rowntree are 2.1 million are now in destitution in this country. And of those, 500,000 are children. I think those are appalling statistics. Next slide. So we've got this cliff edge coming up. And the cliff edge is April, towards the end of April, when furlough finishes and the £20 uplift on universal credit finishes. This week, I've been on a Joseph Rowntree Foundation conference, and one of the speakers was Stephen Crabb, the Conservative MP. And I'm just going to quote some of the things that he said, which I found quite interesting. He said, at some point, my party will have to discuss poverty. Another quote was, he said, to remove the £20 a week uplift seems wrong. It restores what has been squeezed out over the last 5 years. Now, many of the Tories are saying that the £20 uplift was only temporary. But what you've got to understand is all of that £20 is spent locally. So it's not going into the ether. It's not like going into some trustee's bank account or anything. It's being spent locally. Next slide, please. These are the poverty and governance structures that we've come up with. And what we wanted to make sure was that the community were really involved in this. So we've had the poverty agenda group for some time now. Anybody can go on that, but it's mainly groups and charities and residents and partners. We have not been meeting much over the COVID period, but we've started meeting again now. So the idea is that they can have say and put issues directly into the poverty steering group, which so can Scrutiny, and Scrutiny can also put things up into the COVID-19 portfolio, as you've just done. And then from the portfolio and from the poverty steering group, those issues will go to the leadership board. Now, they will also come back down again. So it's expected that the agenda group will have a report from the steering group and answers to any of the issues that we've sent up. It also may be decided in the future that one of the community commissioners from the Poverty Truth Commission may also sit on the steering group, but we'll have to see how that goes. Next slide, please. That is supposed to be a ladder. That's the best thing I could do for a ladder because I'm not blessed with any arty skills. As part of the many hours of research that Amanda Richardson's done for us, it was a piece of work that was called Line of Sight. And this is very appropriate for poverty, especially when you merge it with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The family at the bottom are in crisis. They can see very little apart from making sure that their family eat and have warmth. So the help that needs to go in then is emergency issues, food, fuel vouchers, making sure they're on correct benefits, etc. But then once that is done, hopefully they can move up the ladder, gaining in confidence. Each rung they climb means that they can see a little further, gain a better perspective on things. So on each rung, we should be able to offer various support package till in the end, They're right up at the top. They can see for miles and they're completely independent. Next slide, please. These are some of the aims that came out of the poverty steering group. Just run through them quickly. We want to maximise money in residents' pockets, provide wraparound support, aim to increase residents' confidence to move up the ladder. This is a person-centred approach, and ensure that our services do not further marginalise those who are on low incomes. The socio-economic duty of any Equality Act was removed by the government in 2012. The Greater Manchester Poverty Agenda Group have asked that all councils sign up to work with this, and we are at present updating our equality strategy group, and I've already included the socio-economic aspect as part of it. Next slide, please. There are other suggested actions that came from the steering group, putting together an economic strategy, looking at routes out of poverty through education and through employment, look at the council's department about to make sure they're poverty proofed. We need to fully support the Poverty Truth Commission, set up a support package, make sure there's a front door for residents, and improve our data collection. This shows that poverty is very much crosses all council departments, and all have a responsibility in helping. Oldham's Poverty Truth Commission is now moving. We have 2 officers who are working on this half a day a week. We have Robbie from Action Together who is leading on this. We are now putting together the civic commissioners and the community commissioners, 15 of each. We've got 6 community commissioners already, and we need another 6. The community commissioners will be put with a civic commissioner, and then those will spend a lot of time together over the next 12 months, probably about half a day a week. And hopefully in the end of that, we will come out with something that changes policy in the council. Next slide, please. Other actions. So I've been speaking during the last 18 months with many of our residents, community groups and partners about poverty, and we've come up with many actions, and those are in your report, and I'm just mentioning some of them here. It's really important that we get to know what groups are available in our wards and what, if any, support packages we need to put in. Action Together are doing this piece of work. A lot of work has been done on place-based working, and now is the time to bring that and the work of the Thriving Communities Board and our Poverty Board together. And now that is really important to bring together the work that we're going to be doing in our districts as well. Funding is always a problem, and suggestions have been made that we look at going for a large funding package for many groups rather than small different pots of funding, and also to take a look at the development of a strategic investment fund. Colin and I spoke to Laura Windsor-Welsh from Action Together about this, and we could technically use the Action Oldham fund, but we need to work on this some more. We've been working alongside the Children's Society for over 12 months on a crisis support project. Alongside many of our partners and community groups, we've worked with Tower Hamlets, Swansea and Norfolk. Part of their remit, the Children's Society, was to scrutinise our local welfare provision. The report on that has been made available to you, and some of the questions of this service that you want answering can be found within that report. But our welfare rights service is incredibly good, and they work incredibly hard. I mean, Caroline's been here tonight and will be willing to come and answer any questions that you might have. The way forward is to work together to alleviate poverty and show what a cooperative council can do. We've also been working with children of the North East in poverty proofing our schools. We've done 3. 1 senior and 2 junior, and we talk to all the children in the school and try and find out what they understand by poverty, if they know who the friends are who are poor, and they all know who's on free school meals, and just looking at what the schools do that might impede somebody on a low income. One of the first things we found out was non-uniform day, in that the children who haven't got much money tend not to come in, because one, they haven't got any decent clothes, and two, they can't afford the pound. At the Poverty Agenda Group on Monday, we had a report back from one of the members of the governors of one of the schools, and they've really taken our findings from that school to heart. So we're hoping that once we can get rid of COVID, I wish, then we might be able to do this at more schools. Next slide, please. Just going to whiz through some of these. We've got, obviously, a big problem we've got is clothes. Get Oldham working on a project to help residents need some new clothes for an interviewer to start work. Real are one of our brilliant community groups. They help with food banks, do community online events, and they run Clothes Rack. And they've recently got help from the MP to get a facility to store the clothes. Our charity shops provide clothes to help fund their charities, and Jeff Goodwin, pastor of Bethesda Church, helps with food as well as school uniforms. Next slide, please. Fuel and energy. Our Warm Homes has won massive awards. We're giving fuel vouchers out all the time. The energy companies have been asked to provide emergency packages to prevent families being cut off, but I'm not sure that this is working. In 2018, 11.7% of Oldham's population were in fuel poverty, and of course this now will be more. And our Green Deal is slowly getting off the ground, and hopefully this can help with some cost of energy in the future. Citizens Advice Manchester are running a campaign at the moment to get vulnerable people to put on the priority service register by their energy companies, and we need to push this. Next slide, please. Poorer people die young, and they do. And I read somewhere, and I didn't quite believe it, but the average death rate now in this country for males is 79 and females 83. People need to eat a balanced diet in order to maintain premium health. And if you can't afford to eat, or you're a long way from a supermarket or a market, then it stores problems for later. Some quotes from a Joseph Rowntree health report. Living with day-to-day stresses of poverty in childhood can have a damaging consequences for long-term health. In 41% of 21 to 24-year-olds earn less than the living wage. It is 3 times more expensive to get the energy we need from healthy foods than unhealthy foods. A safety net enables people to invest in their future. 40% of people with unmanageable debt said that they were less likely to study or retrain. Social isolation is causing major mental health issues. Domestic violence is up, child protection is up. Volunteers who are supporting people, like from Age UK, are now picking up possible suicides. Many schools are now using the whole school approach to help with mental health with their pupils. We are also doing some work alongside community groups about helping parents realise some ambition for their children and themselves, and Shahid Mushtaq is leading on this. £1 in every £5 of all spending on public services is needed because of the impact that poverty has on people's lives. Next slide, please. This has become a massive topic of conversation during lockdown. It is so concerning about how many children have not been able to take part in any form of education because a lot of people in this town do not have access to the internet. A lot don't have mobile phones, and a lot where they do have access to the internet, it's only through the phones on very limited credit packages. The Greater Manchester Digital Blueprint sets out its vision for Greater Manchester to be a world-class leading digital city, centred around a focus of empowering businesses and people in the region. Digital marginalisation faces the poorest and most vulnerable communities. Research indicates that people who are digitally excluded are likely to be disproportionately heavy users of government services. The pandemic has highlighted UK's divide, which amplifies the impact of social isolation and loneliness for groups continuing to shield, such as older people and those with serious health conditions. I didn't realise till I got involved that you can't even get a COVID test if you don't have digital access or a mobile phone. Your results comes by mobile phone or down an email. In response to the closure of schools, GMCA has launched phase 2 of its Greater Manchester Technology Fund as an emergency response. Its analysis has found that 15 to 20,000 young people may fall outside of the national programmes to aid remote learning and to be without access to digital device. And data in the city region includes 6,000 16 to 80-year-old college students. Andy Burnham has called on businesses in the community to help with this. Next slide, please. Housing. We work together with our social landlords to improve the lives of our residents. We also realise that we need more social housing, and we have a very large waiting list for new homes, especially social homes. First Choice Homes have an excellent service where they run that bread and butter thing at 4 venues in the town. At first, this was only for First Choice tenants, but now non-tenants can access this service. With bread and butter, the resident pays about £1 to join, and they then help tenants get their finances in order. And each week they'll pay £3.50 to get a bag of food. Amanda Cordran from Revs and Benz has been doing a lot of work with partners to promote the uptake of the discretionary housing payments, help people who are in rent arrears, which is working as the uptake has increased. The government have done some good stuff in that the housing allowance is now linked to benefits, and the government has now just decided again to prolong the process, not to evict people. Next slide, please. Where do we start with food? I just want you to understand how demeaning it is to know that you have to ask for free food. How would you feel if you knew that you couldn't feed your family? Some of us may have been in this situation, and usually it's the parents that don't eat to allow the children to feed. Life has changed in Oldham. In 2010, we didn't have the food bank, and it has changed venues 3 times since. And there's now has got a further unit on the Prince of Wales Industrial Estate. It's full of food. We have also put money into it from extra government funding that has arrived, and the public donate loads of stuff, and so do supermarkets. The next stage up are things like the bread and butter thing, the family pantry, family action, the European Islamic Centre, and many others. Originally, the Ancora project worked from the food bank, and it's back there now. And it is Greater Manchester Poverty Group aim to have financial support available at all food banks. Originally, with the Trussell Trust, you could only get 3 to 4 packets of food, lots of vouchers for food in a 6-month period. That's now completely gone. We've got somebody that's had 14 vouchers, but it's no good just giving people the food. We have to help them with the finances at the same time so that they can move on. We're also producing a food security strategy that we are about to start work on. We're going to speak to growers to see if they can help feed families fresh vegetables during this coming year. We're organising holiday food, and the government has offered us money. We've not offered, we've taken it, money for half term and Easter, and then there's a separate fund for summer, half term and long holidays. Over the Christmas, many other groups surfaced, like the Box of Hope from Sholver, who is continuing to deliver now. Next slide, please. Support and finances. This is one of our main actions. We do have some staff who can help with this, and the wonderful Ancora project works hard on this as well, but we do need more. One of the co-sponsors of the crisis project is Step Change, which is a debt counselling charity. Perhaps we should see if we could work with them. This is up for discussion. We need to get more people to join the credit union. 8 Greater Manchester community credit unions have joined together to launch a COVID-19 recovery plan that will offer hope and financial support to millions of people across the city region. The consortium, known as Soundpound, wants to show communities across Greater Manchester that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and that their local community credit union is there to support them at this time of uncertainty and hardship. It is important that our residents have access to advice, and they don't have to hunt round finding it. One idea that's been floated is to have a community hub where charities can meet residents, and it can be used for the likes of the British Legion for advice surgeries. Molly from the DWP attends our poverty agenda group as well as our armed forces group, and she's informed us that as from the 11th of January, the recoverable hardship deductions payback has been put on hold, which is good news. The 2 payments in a month problem for universal credit has been sorted out, and that is a massive plus. And new applicants to the severe disability payment will now have to go on UC with a transitional payment. Next slide, please. So where do we get help and advice? That is our emergency line. It was originally the COVID hotline, and it's now changed to the emergency community hotline. Residents are triaged and passed on to relevant services, and many are passed on to our district teams. There is also a language line where people who can't speak English can get help. We have been discussing how people with no credit can access the line, and already the staff phone back the people who've hung up during the day. Action Together are conducting a mapping exercise of all groups so that the district teams will know what is out there. Discussion has been held with the Children's Society about the use of a joint referral form or the use of an app like the Greater Manchester Poverty Actions. It was agreed that we will set up an access to advice group, possibly as a subgroup of the poverty agenda group. My main concern with this helpline is how do we make sure that the digitally excluded residents know how to access it? How do we find the hidden poor? My colleague found a family who didn't phone the line as they thought it was only for those with COVID, and they hadn't eaten in it for 2 days and they had children. We need to get it out there what we are doing for you. So please, I've got my teeth in. Residents don't sit at home worrying. Next slide, please. This is a wish list. I don't know if you remember holidays as a childhood. I did. We used to go away with everybody who I went to Sunday school with the weight. We used to save up with the weights club, and we'd all go off to the YMCAs and have a wonderful week. It's brilliant going away with your mates. But now many children in Oldham never get a holiday. So Blackpool, never mind anywhere else, is just something that they've never seen. We have chalets at the Oldham holiday homes in Carnarvon, which are open for people who are struggling. The second picture is Manchester. Many of our children have never been. Their life is just on their street and in their classroom, and this is very sad. So last slide. Thanks, Marcus. We will have to work with many people to get this problem sorted, and sometimes the best person is a young black footballer whose mum asked for him to be put into digs so he could concentrate on his football, being fed and kept on track. A massive thing for a mum and son to do. Jack Munro, food critic and blogger who has worked with Marcus on the National Food Strategy, had a brilliant article in The Guardian this week. She gives a slightly different view. Having gone through poverty herself, she refers to the letter Rashford, Jamie Oliver and others wrote, and she says, but in order to improve the lives of people living in hardship, the voices of those in the eyes of their own personal storm need to be raised and not talked over by well-meaning people. But writing a letter, well-intentioned as it is, calling for a view, feels like sitting in the house that is well alight and musing over where you should have put the fire detector. Children and adults are going hungry now. More than 4.1 million live in poverty, with an estimated 2 more close enough to that edge to fall over in the wake of COVID-19. We need an immediate response to put the food in hungry bellies. Right, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Kath. A very powerful presentation that gets to the point. But just to come back to the report in front of you, we'll take questions on the presentation and the report in a few minutes. But the report sort of outlines a number of recommendations, not least of which is that we invite the Cabinet and Council to endorse the strategy, as it were. So what we're hoping will come out of this meeting is a recommendation from the board that we refer this to the Cabinet for their consideration at this point in time. But there's also a number of other recommendations. Reviewing or rewriting the poverty strategy, last updated in 2010, reviewing the local welfare assistance scheme, and if you've read it, there are a number of questions in the report about the scheme. Investigate further means of developing the Green New Deal programme. Might come back to some of the things that Jonathan was talking about earlier. Determine a means of developing a programme to promote volunteering, access to training, gaining qualifications and entry to employment in conjunction with further education providers. This is sort of, in a sense, sort of links on to some of the points that Donna McLaughlin was also making earlier. Investigate whether there's a need to establish a charitable foundation to support the anti-poverty programme. This touches upon whether we need to look at finding a means of accessing the grant system, or whether we can use an existing means of accessing the grant system. As Kath mentioned, we've been talking to Laura Windsor-Welch about how we might be able to take that forward, and how we might be able to work with Action Together on this kind of approach. So the report sort of attempts to sort of summarise some of the things that we've learned, and I also took the opportunity to find one or two quotes, if you like, from recent articles in the Guardian, and you've got the full articles that the quotes are taken from at the end of the report, so you can see the context in which they were written, as it were, and also the report includes some of the things that Kath's touched upon in her presentation that are currently taking place at the present time, and there are a number of updates that Amanda Richards has provided, and they are marked with a line down the side of the report, as it were. So the lines down the side mark the things that Amanda has added in. There were updates, if you like, on the things that we were investigating or looking at as a possible way forward. One of the things the report attempts to do is to try and highlight those things where we might be able to make the most difference. As I'm sure you all appreciate, poverty is a vast subject, and it would be possible to engage many more topics than we've included in this report, but we felt it better to start with the things that we might be able to do something about relatively quickly, rather than things that we might not be able to address quite so quickly, and so on. So that is what this attempts to do, and obviously we're hoping that it will be possible to engage all members of the council in a variety of different ways in order to try and take this forward. But first, we've got to take it to Cabinet and hope that they will feel able to endorse it. And of course, this is part of Aruja's portfolio, of which Kath is her deputy. Unfortunately, as Kath mentioned, Aruj can't be with us this evening, but we are hoping that she will be able to sponsor the report when it gets to Cabinet. So lots of things that we've touched upon. Any questions or comments? I'm just going to come back to Amanda to see whether she has anything that she might wish to add to the report at this point in time.
Hi, thanks, Chair. Not especially. I think when I was looking at the report, what became really obvious and it's a good thing, was that actually there's some of the key recommendations we'd already started to move forward on and do some thinking around. For example, in terms of how we develop a strategy, how we take forward reviewing our local welfare scheme, which I know we've done a lot of work on through the Children's Society project, which has flagged up, ways in which we can better align with the voluntary sector, how we can clarify our eligibility criteria around that. So I think what struck me was there were areas in those recommendations, areas of work that we were already sort of taking forward, which in a way was quite pleasing, quite comforting to know that we were on the same page with that. I think in terms of moving forward, we've been liaising with Jonathan here on the links to the COVID recovery strategy. A lot of actions have been included in the poverty action plan that I'm currently working on drafting, to bring together the issues really flagged in Councillor Ball's report. So again, a lot of those issues around access to food, access to fuel, housing, employment, again, are carried forward in our action plan. Now, the action plan is tied in with the same timescale as the COVID recovery plan. So that is to bridge the gap for us between needing to have something that's very flexible and responsive as we're still dealing with COVID, whilst trying to give a bit of headroom to begin to look forward longer term into what we need to be doing to maybe try and change some of the longer term causes of poverty rather than just address the symptoms of it. There is a recognition at the moment that a lot of resource, and we know this, a lot of resource across the system is being pulled into helping people to keep afloat, basically, at the minute. Longer term, that isn't going to be sustainable. You know, we need to thinking about how we enable people, how we work with people to put them in a more secure place, give them more choices. So that's where we're going to with the action plan. What we are hoping is as well, the plan is that we have the Poverty Truth Commission running over the next year. So we're engaging with people with lived experience, and we use that as well, working with people to shape what our priorities should be across the system. So we'll be listening to people to find out from them what would make the biggest difference, what are the greatest challenges, what would help them the most. And we've been moving to develop a sort of a full-blown poverty strategy on the back of that, really, and the work we will have been doing over this preceding year. So yeah, a lot going on, Chair, and all positive in terms of having more joined up conversations around what is a very complex and cross-cutting theme, cross-cutting agenda, a real challenge.
Okay, thank you very much, Amanda. Okay, start with Liz, you were first. Any questions, comments from you?
Yes, thanks, Chair, and thanks to you and Kath and everybody who's contributed to the poverty report. Basically, Amanda has just said everything I was going to say, but I think the COVID recovery plan, the 6 points on that, this really feeds into how we formulate our policy to help people. And I think you're absolutely right, Amanda. We'd need to enable people to get out of poverty and not just keep, giving them the means to survive. So I think as members and as a council, we have a huge responsibility to make sure that what we decide in the next few months is absolutely right for our residents. But thank you.
Thanks,
Jamie?
Thank you, Chair. Just to echo Liz's comments there. Yeah, I think it's beholden to us to try and your ladder, Kath. I'm similarly hamstrung when it comes to graphics, but I think your ladder said an awful lot. And I think Liz is absolutely right. You know, we need to be able to get people to see further than the current situation, and get them to see that there is a way out. And thank you very much for all that. Lots of plates spinning in the air, and Amanda's outlined there's an awful lot of work doing. Sorry, a lot of work going on, but there's just 2 points that I kind of picked out, and it's really for you to help me with my ignorance. I'm always, you did pick it out, and it's the fact that a lot of things are digital these days, and we do have to be really, really careful that people don't fall through the cracks, because we kind of rely more and more on digital platforms. And I think your point, Kath, about the phone line and people not realising that they could use that phone line, I think it's great that you've picked that out. But I think that the idea about trying to identify those who may fall through the cracks because they don't have access to digital platforms, how we identify those people, I don't know, but maybe that there are ways within that system to do that. And then my other thought was, you did mention people who are currently in poverty, but then there are people who are teetering on the brink, and I think that's just as important, that we perhaps, I don't know, Kath, Amanda, if there is a way of identifying those people. Do we know who those people are? I know people don't often talk about it. Maybe they keep it to themselves, and unless they come forward, maybe there's nothing we can do. But if we could build something in so that there's a way of potentially identifying who those people might be, and then putting things in place and getting to them early enough to maybe stop them falling over that edge. I don't know, but that's just two of the many plates I can see you've got spinning there. But those are just two things that I picked up on, and I don't know if there's anything we can do about it.
I think advertising the helpline is a real biggie, and there was somebody on from the GMCA, the Combined Authority, on the poverty group the other day, and she was saying some places were looking first to contacting the people who were struggling with the council tax, because that's sometimes your first thing that might go wrong when you've just been made unemployed. But the other idea that somebody's doing, and I've put this to Councillor Jabbar, is that we put a letter in everybody's council tax bills that actually highlights what's available out there, because these letters go to everybody. So I'm hoping that will be taken up, because we do need to get them. And when we have these wonderful meetings with Tower Hamlets, Swansea and Norfolk, and the one thing that comes, and Amanda will agree with this, the one thing that cuts through is this is the worry of everybody. Who are we missing? Who's sitting at home? Like the family that Angela found. It was only because she was out with the First Choice Homes office for the area. This lady came into the garden and said, I don't know if you can help me. But they hadn't eaten for 2 days. And that's really worrying.
Thank you. Elaine.
Thanks, Colin. I mean, yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for pulling the report together, Colin, Kath and Amanda, and obviously all the contributions. I think it's been a really worthwhile exercise, and I hope it's the start of something that can help to really focus our minds and bring people together in terms of working. It's really difficult because, to be honest, I feel really emotional after your presentation, Kath. It's hard not to hear some of those statistics and it not really hit home with you about the depth and the problems that some people are facing on a day-to-day basis. And even with our early help offer, there's no doubt about it that some people are sinking, and we need to be able to capture them people, and we need to be able to capture them quickly. But in terms of me not going on, because I could be all over the place here, because I do feel quite emotional. But I guess one of the things that I'm probably going to focus on really is the employment aspect. And my first question on that actually is is just a technical one, but under the heading where it says employment, we've got a bullet point, well, we've got a point F, and there's nothing at the side of it. And I wondered whether the F shouldn't be there or whether something's been missed off the report. So that's just a technical point for you, Colin, maybe to just double check that.
Actually, I think that's my fault because I typed that bit. So it's just.
It doesn't matter if something's been missed off, Kath. It was just.
Nothing's been missed off. I don't think anything's been missed off.
It's a typo that we should have taken out.
Yeah.
Okay, as long as nothing's missing out of the report, that's the main thing.
I'm a helpist, not a typist. Yeah.
Okay. Well, the one thing that I was going to bring up is, I mean, I think the report's really good. I think it's really thorough. But in relation to the employment aspect of it, from my experience and my work and my understanding of this, I think the measures that were implemented by the Chancellor during the pandemic to try and kind of stabilise the economy doesn't really deal with the more deep-rooted kind of structural issues around low pay. You know, it doesn't tackle the problem of zero-hour contracts and other precarious forms of employment. And there's no doubt about it, the amount of zero-hour contracts has increased massively during the pandemic. And one of the main reasons for that, actually, is because a lot of zero-hour jobs are carried out by our key workers, and the number is also disproportionately higher in towns like ours, in places like Oldham. So the only thing that I guess I'm trying to bring to the table in this is, well, we've talked a little bit in the report about mapping. So mapping out, you know, the voluntary sector and that. But in terms of the employment, I wonder if it might be possible for us to look at mapping out in that as well, because the reason I think that's so important is because the point that Amanda made about, you know, we have to deal with the here and now, and we have to deal with the people that are in poverty. But in terms of treating the problem and not just the symptoms, the route out of poverty, without doubt, is obviously education, increasing people's skill set and allowing them to move into the world of work and to obviously have safe, secure, well-paid employment. The problem is that world of work is changing rapidly, and even take out of the equation things like the fact that obviously logistic company work has gone through the roof because of the amount of online ordering and the fact that they're taking on owner drivers to do the deliveries. What we're even seeing now is elements in like the retail sector where, because of the fact that, you know, they've had the lockdowns, etc., we get in stores who haven't employed people on a zero-hour basis before start to do that. So just as an example, I'm sure there's lots, I'm not picking on them, but Iceland is a good example of that. They didn't used to have zero-hour contracts. We have the pandemic, and then they're taking people on that basis, so they don't have to worry about furloughing staff, topping wages up, etc. So, I mean, it's this whole thing is a minefield, but my point is really, I guess, just in terms of doing some of the mapping, although we do have the national statistics, we don't have a lot of local statistics about that kind of information. I think there's organisations we could work with to help get it. And I do think it's important because I think the strategy in terms of trying to bring well-paid, secure employment to our town, we have to know what we're dealing with. We have to know what kind of jobs are there, what kind of pay rates are being offered, and all of those things. I'm not saying we take that on ourselves, but I think it is a body of work that we need to consider at some point and looking at who can assist us in that. And there are some very, I think as a town, obviously, what we do and how we deal with poverty, it's going to be done on a very local basis. But with some of these things, I think we can obviously go outside of Oldham. So obviously we've got like the LRD at Warwick University who might be interested in looking at some of those things for us in terms of, because obviously it's statistic driven. So they're not dealing with obviously what we have to deal with in terms of the issues within the town, but there is other organisations outside that could maybe help us with that. So I'm not expecting anybody to commit to that or take that on to tonight, obviously, but I just think it's a consideration, and I'll leave it there, and I'll let other people come in because I know it's an emotive issue. But thank you for your presentation, Kath. It was really good, and you know, everyone who's contributed, I feel like this has been the most worthwhile piece of work I think that I've done since I've become a councillor in terms of like my involvement in committees. So thank you.
Thank you, Elaine.
Thank you.
Any follow up to that, Amanda, at all? I know you I think you tried to get in before, but anyway, anything you wish to add to any of those contributions?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks everyone for your comments and your input. Lots of food for thought there. And you're right, Councillor Taylor, it is a really emotive area of work, you know, and I think that there are many people in the council, officers and members, who care passionately about this stuff and, you know, trying to make a difference. In terms of just reflecting on some of the points in detail, what we've done in the Poverty Action Plan is try to make sure that we cover work around the 4 key drivers of poverty, which are affordable housing, because housing costs are a big part of people's income. Employment, people need to be in jobs, but they need to be in, as Councillor Taylor was saying, good, relatively secure jobs to be able to keep afloat. And we need to maximise people's benefits. So where people are on benefits, whatever that might be, UC, that we're helping them to maximise those benefits to help them get by. That picks up work around, for example, employment, economic strategy, that we flagged in our action plan, but it will be colleagues in our economic development department who will be working with to pick up some of this. And we do try and already do a lot, you know, we're a living wage employer at the council. We have done work around researching what we can do as an anchor institution. And I think Donna before from the NHS was giving an example of how we can, within the work that we do, try and build in, you know, those benefits for local people in terms of being able to access jobs that are likely to be a bit more well paid, a bit more secure. So again, I think what the action plan has started us off down the line of is actually doing some of this, looking across the system, you know, to see who's doing what and who we need to be working with to try and make some headway on these issues. We've also got a GM level above this, a Greater Manchester level. So of course, you know, we need to be having discussions at that level about how Oldham fits into the GM family, in terms of things like housing, economy, how we're placed in terms of those more strategic approaches to development. So there are other conversations to be had there as well. In terms of coupling back to a couple of the points that Councillor Curley raised around digital and how we can try and identify those families who are just about managing, but actually they're right on the edge of the threshold. And it's something that we have been trying to, you know, understand a bit better. We're we've got certain things that I think will help us in that. So we've got some work going on in terms of our data and intelligence colleagues around how we map economic vulnerability. So we're keeping a sort of watching eye, if you will, on where unemployment rates are beginning to edge up, where claimant rates are edging up. Again, we can probably do some work around council tax arrears. We're asking our registered landlord partners to keep a watch out for people who are beginning to struggle with their rent. So we're trying to build in those flags and those warnings about which areas seem to be beginning to struggle and the numbers around that. In terms of identifying particular families, I was having a discussion with some education colleagues about free school meals and the COVID winter grant that funded some of the vouchers over Christmas. And it was felt that the schools knew their families who were just on the edge. You know, you could ask them, and those teachers, governors would know who were beginning to struggle. So maybe that's a piece of work we could come back to. And obviously, as we develop our place-based working, there will be, you know, I'm sure, opportunities to build those links with communities, to get that information from them, you know, at that local level and be able to plug in. But it is a major challenge because, of course, it's hard for people to admit they're struggling in the first place. In a lot of cases, people don't want to admit that they can't afford to feed the kids that week when they've always been okay. So again, there's perhaps a bit of work we need to do around stigma, around don't be ashamed. You know, lots of people are struggling, come for help, and we will try and help. So I think there's something around that overall outlook and that messaging that we can do. In terms of the digital exclusion, you're absolutely right. This has come up, you know, time and time again, as Councillor Ball was saying. My colleague Jonathan will recognise this as well. It's something we're very conscious of in terms of the whole discussion that's been going on around the helpline, around district teams, around how people access information and advice. Our voluntary sector partners are saying, you know, there will still be a number of people for whom online is just not doable for whatever reason that is. So I think we're absolutely mindful of the need to make sure that people do still have an alternative, even if, you know, the bulk of the provision may be online or through referral systems. Then we do still need to ensure that that protection is there for people, that they can still access us. Again, some work that will help with that. There's work ongoing on a digital inclusion strategy. So again, people are thinking around that. And the work we've been doing actually around trying to understand and simplify our referral routes for advice across the system is also helping us to understand what changes we can make and where we need to make them to ensure that people can still access both digitally and in person as well, obviously when COVID has made that possible to do that. So again, we're learning, you know, and I think the thing is we're having to learn really quite quick, but we've also got some work that we've already done where we're beginning to know that we can work together in a crisis situation and act quite quickly to help. So part of the challenge we've got is also taking that learning, getting hold of it and developing that so that we can give people the help they need when they need it. So yeah, lots for me to take back and just make sure that we've covered it in the action plan and that we're flagging up the right people to be following up with. So yeah, thanks very much for your comments. That's been really, really helpful.
Okay, thank you very much. And last thoughts from anyone? So are you happy to endorse the recommendation that we take the presentation and the report to Cabinet and then see where that takes us from there? Happy to agree that?
Happy to agree that.
Okay, thank you very much. Which then leaves us with 2 items, I think. The key decision document. Any questions or comments about the key decision document? Happy to note.
Noted, Chair.
Noted.
Okay, thank you very much. And last but not least, the work experience. Sorry, not the work experience. The work programme seems like an experience at times, but anyway, I've got 1 meeting of this municipal year left on the 9th of March. The thing to mention, apart from anything else, is that we will probably have somewhere in the order of 7 items. The usual thing happens that reports have been rolled around, rolled forward, backwards, etc. And we get to the end of the year and we're trying to tidy up everything. So there could well be 6 or 7 items on the agenda. I think there's already 6 on this programme now. So it is going to be a busy night. One of the things I'm toying with is whether we split it into 2 parts and we run a workshop in order to ensure that we're able to deal with all of the items effectively, rather than as we get towards the end of the night struggling to deal with the last couple maybe. But more information on that when I've had a chance to discuss this with Constitutional Services and then see where that takes us. But trying to deal with 7 items effectively, I think, is a tall order. And the last year, I think we finished at something like 9:10. And I don't really want to put us in that position again. But at the same time, I don't feel that we can simply ignore some of the items that are on the programme at the present time. We need to deal with them in as effective a way as possible. So there will be a conversation to be had with Liz and others in Constitutional Services as to how we deal with this, and then come back to you with some further information as soon as possible. Any other questions or comments on the work programme? Everybody happy to note it? Thank you very much. Which then brings us, I think, to the end of the show for the evening, and it just remains for me to mention that, as I say, the next meeting is on the 9th of March, and to thank you all for your invaluable contribution this evening, and look forward to seeing you all in time for the next meeting. Thanks very much indeed. Good night.
Thank you, Chair. Bye.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, everybody, for your contributions.
Good night, guys. Yep.
Thank you.